All right, so this is the July 28th Life IQ Living Community call. So this is going to be the first of 4 calls I'm going to do. The next one will be August 25th, and we'll put these out there each time. And I felt like it'd be important to follow up on some of the things about Life IQ Living. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at that information on my website. If you actually just do lifeiqliving.com, it'll point you and take you to that page, which talks about the foundational pieces of this conversation. And then we followed up from the Life IQ Living, which had to do with cultivating and developing a healthy physical, healthy body, mindset, and spiritual, to building on that foundation of health in order to live with intentionality and stability, hope in this particular season of life. And so shared about the Deeper Life book, the 8Q coaching process. And I thought it would be really great to, as a follow-up for that, is to share each 2 questions each month as a way of being a part of community. So we're going to jump in and talk about this Life IQ Living in a community sense. And we're going to focus on the first 2 questions. So this is just a summary of the 8 questions, in case you didn't see that or miss it. I know a number of you are familiar with this at this point. And we're going to talk about today, who is God, which focuses on your theology, and who am I? Which is identity. And then we'll just pick up the next 2 questions in August, the next 2 September, the next 2 October, and just roll through it like that. So jumping in here, so who is God? So the focus here is really to help move us beyond information, beyond knowledge about God, and moving us towards more of that relationship experiencing of God. Some of you probably remember a book written by Henry Blackaby years ago now called Experience God, which is really a powerful book. I remember the first time going through that in a new church plant that we were doing here in Philadelphia, and how influential it was on the new Christians and people that we were trying to work with as we were growing this little church in Philadelphia. And we really can learn a lot of information and knowledge about God, which we talked about in our the last conversation that we did around this. But the fact is, we need to also implement this. This has to make some difference in our life. And so I want these times to be practical and useful. So I'm going to just unpack some thoughts, but I really want to make sure that there's some interaction about how can you put these into practice in your life, so that when we're done our 25, 30 minutes, we're able to just jump right in and have some good takeaways from the time. So one of the outflows of focusing on who is God is this idea of creating your own personal theology statement. So in the last one of these seminars I did, or I'm sorry, the Zoom calls, was this idea of a personal theology example. And so what I want to do is just unpack this a little bit and then get some of your thinking and input here, and then we'll jump into the second question as well. But I actually trimmed this list down and went to just some of these in order to give a good example. So the first one is this personal theology statement about God. So my God is absolutely sovereign. So we know in Scripture it talks about God as being sovereign. He rules over everything. He's in charge. We know God's not sitting or walking around his throne pacing and wringing his hands and wondering what's going to go on next. He is absolutely in control and sovereign. So even when life seems out of control, He's firmly in charge. So that's sort of a statement, right? So we can say, yes, yeah, that's a great statement. So my God is absolutely sovereign. So even when life seems out of control, he's firmly in charge. And we can almost leave it there. But the idea of a personal theology statement is to then put it into some kind of an application. And what you notice is, and this is my application of it, and you can, and this is the point of this community calls, is to apply it into your world. So he is firmly in charge. Therefore, I can rest and release the outcome to his hands. So the idea is take whatever that thing of that particular attribute of God, in this case is sovereignty, and then apply it into our life in a way that's going to have an impact, a difference it's going to make. One of the things that we had talked about way back when we were first going through some of these healthy mind, body, spirit calls is something called the Pause app, Pause, by John Eldridge. And one of the things he does is he says, Jesus, I give everything and everyone to you. I give everything and everyone to you. And that's the part of the Pause app that he does. And if you download that, it's a great way to take a couple of breaks during the day and just to rest and release things into God's hands. And so this is an outflow of this thinking about who is God and what difference does this make in my life? What's the practical difference this is making? The next one, my God is completely good. So another attribute of God we know is that he's good. Scripture says he is good over and over. So even when circumstances and people seem bad, he is at work with my best interest in mind. Now, we know this because if you think of Romans 8:28, right? So you can all probably are familiar with this. You may be able to quote it. You know, we know that all things are working together for good to them that love God and them called according to his purpose. So we know that God is completely good. He's at work. He's working things with my best interests in mind. So again, we could put a period there and just say, yes, you know, this is so good and so rich. But what does that mean? You know, how do I want to apply that today into my world and my life? So I put down, therefore, I can be genuinely optimistic and not a victim. And so however that fits for you, however that resonates for you, you know, add that to the list. You know, therefore I'm genuinely optimistic and not a victim. The next one, my God is unconditional in his love. Nothing that happens and nothing I do can cause him to love me any more or less. Again, a great theology statement, really powerful. Therefore, I can walk in freedom without guilt or condemnation. So what I did with the next group is I left a few here, again, as examples. And I put the little comma, therefore I can, and am. So just, all-knowing, all-powerful. So I'd like to open it up just for next 5 minutes or so and just go around and get some input from folks who are here. And let's see, got some folks on the screen. Hello all. And I'd love to hear from you what you are noticing or how this resonates with you. So if you think about yourself and who God is to you, how does this resonate with you? So who would like to go first? And pick whichever one of these you think really is speaking to you, and then share what does that mean then? Therefore I can what? So who would like to go first?
Is it okay if I go?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Meg.
Well, on the sovereign thing, I know that for me, and we had a lot about this in my theology classes, that sometimes in the modern church, sovereignty is confused with omnicausality, meaning that God makes everything happen and everything is predetermined. And so that's definitely not true. And so for me, for him to be sovereign means that he can work everything for good. It doesn't mean that I won't mess up or not line up with him, or that other people in my life won't make things difficult that has nothing to do with him. So for me, I can sort that out in my own head, but if I was working with clients, I would want to explore their understanding of that and clarify all of that, because I think there is some wrong teaching about that around in some churches, not in mine, but so I just wanted to throw that in. But yeah, and does that resonate? The big word that fits with this with me is alignment. That my job is to align with God's desires for me and his promises for me. So a lot of the stuff I'm working on is the whole thing of understanding, I guess you could say, my original design and God's vision, how I'm known in heaven. There's different language like that. Sure. And so the more I align with who God is and who God is for me, and the more I align my thinking, my worldview, and my emotions ultimately with his view of me, his emotions toward me, then I can live in that rest as we're talking about. So that is how I would take all those wonderful theological phrases and express them experientially. Mm-hmm. That makes some kind of sense.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And here's the encouragement I always give when I work with folks with this is, so these are examples. And as all of us, when we give examples, we're trying not to make people cookie cutters of ourselves, right? It's got to be something where the person and their relationship with the Lord is being reflected. So take these and, add your statements to them. So come up with your own personal theology example. One of the, or list, because I have, let me see if I can find it. So I actually, have the list that I pulled these off of, and I just leave it posted on my bulletin board on the wall that you can't see, but it just helps us. It's a helpful reminder to be aware that is, and sometimes I'll reflect on these as part of my my time with the Lord. But these are part of the output. So this personal theology is part of that strategic daily renewal plan I talked about as part of the output of the AQ coaching process. So anybody else got time for one more person? If you want to share about one of these attributes and what it might mean to you, or how it's making a difference in your world. Don't be bashful. We're all friends here.
I'll go ahead, and I'm Deb. I love this idea of a personal theology statement. So many of these things I know, they're in my head and hopefully in my heart, but to actually see it and be able to refer to that I appreciate what you shared, Meg, about the sovereignty of God. I think one of the things that really resonates with me is the therefore part. You know, that therefore I can rest and release the outcome. Therefore, I'm genuinely optimistic and not a victim. It just really is helpful in these times. It just seems like we've gone from, you know, one crisis to another. And it's just so helpful to keep this perspective, you know, the more of the eternal perspective, instead of just looking at what's going on, you know, the circumstances, all the unrest, the, you know, the fears, the anxieties, but to be grounded in what is true.
Yeah.
And I would like to do this and post it because I think that would be really helpful for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, and that's it. That's absolutely, because, you know, as Scripture says, we walk by faith, not by sight. Unfortunately, our physical eyes and what we see here and all that around us is much more dominant than sometimes our spiritual eyes, right? So these help us to walk as Scripture says. We are sojourners, and we are not. This world isn't our final destination, that's for sure. And we do know Jesus does plan, you know, to come one day and will rule and reign. But until that day, the world is in this world you will have trouble, as Jesus said. But be of good cheer; I've overcome the world. All right, so yeah, so the takeaway for this, and we'll sort of do a summary at the end, is to work on and create your own personal theology statement, and just help to build that out so that's something that you work through. And you can see, especially thinking about this process, is that understanding who God is so key to then understanding how we live our life, how we orient and live out who we are. And there's a quote in here which I won't read, but it's by Andrew Murray in this book, Waiting on God, which is really a treasure. If any of you have never read it, I'd really encourage it. But he talks about the fact that as we wait on God and as our eyes are set on Him, we realize that we can get impatient with men and circumstances that hinder our progress, but oftentimes our frustration can really be impatience with God, because He won't do what we want Him to do when we want Him to do it. And so we have to wait on Him and His wisdom and His sovereign will. So I'll give you, this will be part of the follow-up, and I'll send this out as a PDF so you can chew on that, see what it might do for your soul. All right, so next question, who am I? So thinking about this one, you want to think, you know, why has God allowed you and me to be living on planet Earth now in this time and season? So instead of starting with this idea, well, what am I supposed to do? Start with this question, and as coaches, we love questions, right? What am I created for? So start there. Versus, you know, what am I supposed to do? What am I created for? So by understanding our design or our wiring is key to knowing our purpose and how to live it out. And so one of these that I love to do, and this is just one of many, is understanding personality. And there's different personality assessments. All of you are familiar with different ones. You have Myers-Briggs, which is an old standard. The DISC inventory, the Enneagram is very popular right now. I actually use one that I like, and it's mentioned in the 8Q coaching book, or the Deeper Life book as well, called the People Map. And the reason I like using it is it's pretty simple to administer, simple to apply. It's certainly not got all of the robust information that you might get from taking one of those other assessments, but it's very accessible and certainly is a good place to get started with it. And so the the people map has 4 different types of personality that it talks about. One is leader, then you have free spirits, then you have people types, and then you have task types. And essentially you have 2 dominant type and then 2 less dominant, but everybody has all 4 of those in your wiring in some degree. So leader type, free spirit type, task type, and people type. And just by me describing or giving you those labels, you already can realize, oh, okay, versus like a disc. Well, a D, an I, an S, a C. Well, what in the world do those mean? With Myers-Briggs, you got 16 different types. ISTJ, ENFI, NFP, and what does all that mean? So by me telling you, you're perhaps a leader people or a people, free spirit or whatever, you can sort of in your head get a sense of what your personality is like. And one of the elements with doing that is then going back to this question, instead of what am I supposed to do, what am I created for? So if you think about God, when he was planning who you are, he designed you with a purpose. And so personality is one of those things. Obviously, strengths is another. He gave you certain skills and abilities. So thinking about that, what I would encourage you to do is dig in, find your favorite personality program. Now, if you do become or get the 8Q coaching process, which I did, here's the people map assessment. That'll come to you. Marion, yours is coming. It'll be a little slower since you're overseas, but it's on its way. But one of the things you can then do, and I did this with a coaching client yesterday, is be able to talk about how then to apply that to your world, your life. And it informs then what you're created for, and how you're supposed to live that out. One of the other great things that I like about using this assessment is it also has some communication keys to it. So it helps to, when you're working or you're interacting with people in your team and they're not like you. So if, let's say you're a strong leader, leaders want things to be brief. They want them to be, quickly. They don't want too much detail. They want to make a decision and go. Where, let's say, a people person wants to catch up. Hey, how are you? How's things? How's your family? How are your children? And just be very much more informal and conversational. But a leader and a people trying to talk together, you can see there'll be a pretty strong clash, because the leaders will just hurry up, give me the information, and the people person is just, they're trying to build relationship and they're trying to connect. So one of the things that we'll be sending out is how to communicate with different personality styles based on those 4: the leader, free spirit, people. So so you want to email me if you've been in this, if you already indicated to me, hey, I'm going to be there. And in fact, what would be great is if you can put into the chat window, please send me the assessment. So please, so in the chat window down here, please send me the assessment if you want that. And then I'll save the chat, and everybody who puts that in there, I'll send it to you. But it really helps you then to figure out how do I communicate with different personality styles. So takeaways from our time: work on and develop your own personal theology statement, which we went over. Look for ways to apply your wiring, starting with your personality, into understanding your life purpose. This is a really key thing, because you're only going to get frustrated. Let's say you're not a leader. Let's say you're a task-oriented person, and you're put into a leadership role, you're not going to feel very comfortable. And God is not calling you to be the out front person if he didn't give you the wiring or the design to be a leader. And the same if, let's say, you're a strong leader and you're finding yourself constantly having to do all these details and all this stuff with organization and managing all these things, that's just going to frustrate you and drive you crazy. So you want to look for ways to how to apply my wiring, my design, as I think about my life purpose. What does God have me here on this planet Earth to do in this time, in this season? All right, so before we wrap up, we got a couple more minutes. What questions or thoughts does that bring up for you about applying and bringing personality into your everyday life, your decisions, how you interact, the kind of things you choose to do or not do? How is this helpful for you?
Hi, I'm Diana.
Hey,
And
Diana.
I'm hearing an echo. Maybe I'll work on my, oh, maybe that went away. Okay. So I'm thinking about Moses and how, he was a reluctant leader, and how God brought Aaron and Hur and various other people and, judges in each tribe and all of that to assist him. So it wasn't up to him to do it all. He was given wise counsel. He was willing to listen to his father-in-law and to use the other people who were brought into his sphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly. He was open to input and feedback. That's a sign of humility, on his part. Good.
But he had kind of was reaching that stage of burnout before he was, ready to receive that information.
Yeah. Who else? How can you thoughts about applying your design towards your everyday life, what that's going to look like for you? So just thinking, and we'll wrap it up with this. Anybody who would say you are a leader type, raise your hand. Any leaders? All right, we got one. Katrina's, I'm not sure, is that a yes or a no, Katrina? You're scratching your nose. Any task types? You're a task type. You love details and organization. Okay, Katrina. Any free spirits? You like to have fun. You don't want to be boxed in. Thank you, Diana, Marianne. And any people types? You love people and you like relationships. Okay, good. And yeah, it's going to be two together at the top, two at the bottom, less. And what's funny is a lot of times, and I was doing some coaching around this, in communication, it really helps to understand who is on your team. If you're married, your spouse, if you're spending time in work teams, who are these people and how do they relate? Because it really makes a huge difference on how well that team works and operates. All right, great. Well, it's been terrific to be together. Hopefully you all enjoyed this. So reminder, and let me shrink my screen here. Next month, we're going to meet on the 25th at 12 noon Eastern, and we can hang out for a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, it's been great to be together. So I'm going to stop the recording, and but I'll hang out for another minute or two.